This is a recording about DNA, chromosomes, genes, alleles. And the first thing to say is that you mustn't get scared by these words. You've just got to know what they mean and know how to spell them. And then it actually becomes very simple. And the first thing to say about DNA is it's found in the nucleus. Here on the right-hand side, we can see a cell. A cell membrane controls what goes in and out of the cell. Cytoplasm, where most of the reactions happen in the cell. Nucleus controls the activities of the cell. And it does this through DNA. And DNA is like the unique recipe that you and I, or any organism has, which is the thing which will control what it looks like, the way it is, what it does. I look different to you because my DNA is different from you. And we need to know the levels of the way that chromosomes lead to genes, lead to alleles, and lead to DNA itself. So there we've got chromosomes. Now we have 23 pairs in every single human cell we have. You need to know that, 46 chromosomes in total, that you receive 23 from your mother and 23 from your father, and they pair up, and they give recipes for the same things. And what they do is they line up against each other. And when you were a fetus in your mummy's uterus, you effectively had a translation of the DNA denoted by your father and your mother into an overall version, which is you. And we can see here these chromosomes, 23 pairs. There's obviously only 2 pairs shown here. The red and the blue. Red might be from the father and blue might be from the mother. And then there's another red from the father and blue from the mother. So there's 2 pairs here, 4 chromosomes in total. There would be 23 pairs of chromosomes and 46 in total. So let's look at a little more detail now about how these chromosomes are arranged. And you can see, as we get closer, they have got bands on them. And bands are, we're going to see now, called genes. And these genes are a section of the DNA, and this whole chromosome is made of DNA, is a section of DNA that codes for a protein or a characteristic. So if I look at these bands here, that band might be for eye colour, that band might be for how freckly your skin is, that band might be for how big your feet are. Now in truth, we actually have about 19,000 of these genes, and they control things very subtly, and a lot of them mix and match and change each other and alter each other. But for our purposes, it's easy to look at things and say that each one is for a specific feature. And if we go even further, we can actually see on a gene, we can see that it contains DNA, and it's made of DNA. And DNA is a double helix, which means each one is a swirled strand, and they are wound around each other like a spiral. And there's 2 of these threads, and if you look at these threads in more detail, you can see that they have this red and green backbone, should I say. And then linking the backbones are these things called bases. And these are the things which give the individual nature of any DNA molecule. And that's because, if you can see here, thymine is brown and cytosine is pink, adenine blue, and guanine grey. Here we have thymine, cytosine, guanine, thymine, adenine. And that is the order in which they're in. Now we could change that to thymine, adenine, cytosine, guanine. And if you have billions and billions of these, what we call base pairs, a different arrangement will give a different layout and a different organism. And so chromosomes are made of DNA. We can zoom out here, and they consist of genes, and the genes are all found on these chromosomes, of which there are 23 pairs, 46 in each cell. Now, you need to know that hierarchy. So we go chromosome, gene, and a gene is made of DNA. But I've missed one of the words out there, and the word that I'd like to now discuss is allele. Now, if we go into the genes here, when the other chromosome lines up, which would be, in fact, let's keep this. Here's the red from the father, and here is the blue from the mother. Now, these chromosomes will line up against each other at fertilization. 23 would have been denoted by the sperm, and 23 would have been denoted by the egg, and they will line up against each other. And then, in order to decide what the organism looks like, the DNA will be what we say is expressed. All of these genes, lining up against all of these genes, father and mother, will line up, and this is not the word to use, but they almost compete against each other. There is a decision made about which of the versions of the genes will be expressed. Will it be the father's or the mother's? Or sometimes both together. And the versions of the genes, you can see actually, you can still see the bands here. All those bands are the genes. All those bands, less distinct here, but they're all going to be exactly the same bands opposite for each chromosome. These bands both carry, they are the same gene opposite each other. So that, let's say this is eye colour. And the bands on each one are alleles, because this has a certain allele and this has a certain allele for the same gene. An allele is a version of a gene. So if this bottom band here is eye colour for this particular gene on this particular chromosome, the allele might be blue eyes here and brown eyes here. And as I hope you know, when they line up against each other, there will be an expression of brown eyes, and then the blue comes against brown. And so I just want to finish the podcast by maybe showing an analogy here. And it's this. Here we have a pretty grim looking, okay. There we have a pretty grim looking eggy bread. And that is the eventual dish that was prepared. Remember I said that DNA is the recipe. And so we see here, and you can actually see what things have been incorporated into this. There's a piece of bread and there's egg. There might be a few things you can't see in here that have gone in, but they're there. But overall, this is the final product. And we call this the phenotype. That's what you can actually see. That's the expression of the genes and the way they've come out and they're seen. What is seen, that's the phenotype. And then if we were to actually look at this though and think, what DNA went to make this, if we were going to use an analogy? And the answer is that we can see here. I've just put some different versions of different genes here. Here is a chromosome from the mother, a nice pink colour, and here is the chromosome from the father, and they've paired up. And we can see here, there is a gene. Each of these is genes, but there's different alleles of those genes. The allele here from the mother is an egg, and the allele here from the father is broccoli. The allele here from the mother is brown bread. The allele here is white bread. The allele here from the mother is nutmeg. The allele here from the father is tarragon. The allele here from the mother is salt. And the allele here from the father is pepper. And when these two line up at fertilization, these will be denoted by the egg because they're the mothers, and these will be denoted by the sperm. These alleles, one of them, will be expressed. And I've taken, in fact, you can see on this side now, the ones that were expressed. And they were egg, white bread, nutmeg, and salt. So in fact, in this scenario, the father has only donated one of the alleles. It's white bread. The mother has donated the egg, the nutmeg, and the salt in these different alleles. So the alleles are versions of genes. These are genes, each band, and the alleles are versions. And the end result of those three coming together is what we had at the beginning, that kind of mess. Notice a couple of things. The first is, some are very clear to see. The white bread and the egg are still very clear there. And that could be a bit like blue eyes or brown skin, or an allele which gives a very, very clear phenotype. But you actually can't see the nutmeg and the salt. And they would be the genes that contribute to the way you are, but you maybe can't see. Your blood group, for example, or the way that the enzymes that are produced in your cells. These kind of things are alleles which will go up to make up the phenotype, but are not necessarily shown in the phenotype. Last thing to say is this, last word. That is the phenotype. This is the genotype. The alleles that you have for a given gene is your genotype. So we talked about eye colour, for example, and you know about eye colour as big B, small b, big B for brown eyes, small b for blue eyes. The genotype of a child who had big B from his father and small b from his mother would be big B, small b, because at that gene his representations were big B and small b. A child who inherited big B and big B from both parents would have a genotype of big B, big B. So here the genotype is egg broccoli. Here the genotype is brown, white. Here the genotype is nutmeg, tarragon. And here the genotype is salt and pepper. So that is a run-through of chromosomes, genes, alleles, and DNA itself. DNA is in the nucleus, controls the activities and the way that an organism looks. The way it looks is the phenotype, and the alleles that are within the DNA are the genotype. Any questions, please email me, but I hope that clears up some of the issues about DNA.